Okay, well, what happened was whether they took the Western advice was followed. Okay, that's a fact because they massed armor in the southeast and they tried to break through to cut Crimea off, which is what the generals told them they could do because their war games said they could do it. They did 6 war games and Ukraine can bust through, but Ukraine didn't have air cover. Ukraine couldn't get their military vehicles out there and it would turn into a graveyard. And
since the 1800s, Crimea has been an extremely strategic place for any conflict in the region. So I would hesitate to say that anything attempting to take strategic advantage of cutting off Crimea would be like a modern Western strategy because people have been doing that. People have been attempting to do that for hundreds of years.
I mean, the idea of cutting off the land is fine, but the Ukrainians didn't have the air cover. They didn't have the training. The Russians had too long to dig in. They couldn't get through the minefields, and the vehicles weren't properly outfitted, and we got them killed. And they abandoned the plan within 4 days. So obviously, it was a big failure. And now they can't even play defense anymore because you squandered all their resources with your big war game simulation plan. I mean, this is how we lose.
I'm going to have to see that frontline trace move before I'm convinced.
We're going to lose this. If we had just played defense and kept them alive, we'd be in a lot better spot than playing, hand of God on the battlefield there.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, largely from Russian connected sources.
I don't know. I mean, the strategy is a failure. Hi, everybody. This is John Koenig back with Real Veteran News. Back again with good friend Andrew DiBenedetto, former Ranger with myself back in the day, and still good friend. So how are you doing, Andrew?
Not bad, John. Not bad at all. Yourself?
Great. I'm doing good. It's good morning energy. I know you woke up and got ready this morning, so thank you for participating and everything. You want to introduce yourself? In case people didn't see you last time you're on?
Yeah, sure. I'm Andrew. I'm an Army veteran. I'm actually still in, though none of my opinions on the news today should be constructed as being representative of the opinion of the United States government.
I don't see it that way, so I don't know anyone else should either.
I know that you don't. You know me better than that.
Yeah. All right, cool. So we got good topics this week, starting off usually with the most important stuff here, which would be Israel, Gaza, Biden, Netanyahu relationship. All right, so we've got Mason now because Dibbs doesn't want to talk about Israel, and it's a little sensitive. So we're going to have Mason pinch hit and go through the Israel articles. We also need to talk about the base that got hit in the Middle East. So let's talk about Israel first. Mason. This is boiled down a lot to, and the future of this is based on the Biden-Netanyahu relationship. They had a 4-week gap in their phone calls after we reported, and everyone reported it. Biden hung up on Netanyahu because Netanyahu's doing a hard line, and he doesn't want the war to stop because he doesn't want elections. He's against Palestinian statehood. He's against going back to the two-state solution, which is kind of like the default peace process that has always been there, and then he doesn't want Hamas linking up with PLO. They want to keep Hamas and the PLO separate. Or Palestinian Authority is what they call it.
I think Biden is in a situation that it's lose-lose for him because he needs to say that, well, it's not his place to tell the Israelis what to do. I feel bad for him because it's, in a lot of ways, it's his own making because it's his foreign policy, but he's not allowed to intervene in Israeli military operations, especially when you see they were attacked. So Israel has a right to self-defense. And as long as Hamas is operating, as long as Gaza exists, Hamas will operate and terrorist elements will operate there. That's just a given fact. So Israel has a right to kind of defend itself there. But as you mentioned, we've talked in the past, mass relocation of people is a war crime. You can't tell Israel what to do, but at the same time, it's just a bad situation.
What to do. We give them money. Usually when you're giving someone money, they do what you say. They don't give us money. What do they give us?
Heartache. a good cause to defend, I guess.
Honestly,
but is it even
they've not really been negotiating in good faith for quite a long time because we essentially backed them too much. We just 100% backed them for decades and decades, and they didn't have to negotiate. And they've dominated the Palestinians, and they've played whatever games they want to play. And now they want to be able to do whatever they want to do because
that's a really fair point.
They want to do what they want to do in the response here, and they always maintain their independence from us, even though they're like an appendage of us, basically. And they had known this was coming. They knew that at some point they were going to have to like smash some Palestinian teeth in, and they knew that they can get away with doing whatever they want for a certain amount of time before the American president and the Congress will react and really like clamp down on them. And they've got a lot of people running interference with them in the United States and in DC, from lobbyists, AIPAC, and just influence. So too.
So you completely said exactly what I was kind of avoiding saying, which is like he kind of needs to defend Israel, I think. Sorry, my throat's a little under the weather. So he needs to defend Israel, but the way he does that is just have a carrier group. But I didn't want to mention this because I haven't looked at. You can have a carrier group in the Mediterranean that's still in international waters, I believe. So you can legally have a carrier group there that kind of becomes a sentinel defense for Israel. And as a result, as you mentioned, Israel can then bully people as though they were the United States' military. And I had never thought of it that way.
Well, it fixes Hezbollah. I think they only have one aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean now, but it fixes Hezbollah because Hezbollah can't essentially open up because they don't know what's going to happen if we start like an air war against them. And then they're committed. They're tying down Israeli resources in the north in order to help in Gaza. But the Israelis basically can't fight in the north and fight in Gaza and protect their flank in West Bank.
So here's the question, if you don't mind me asking. I thought the West Bank is considered Palestine. So if Netanyahu is saying no Palestine, does that mean after Gaza, assuming Gaza, if there's no Palestine, is he going to rename the remainders, or they have to all go? And after those go, what is West Bank? Where do they go? Because that's Palestine, right?
There's these two areas where essentially Palestinians like remained after the previous conflagrations and the movement of people around in that area. People have been moving around due to violence there a lot over the last however many years. The Israelis don't really want Gaza because there's just like so many Palestinians on it, and it's like all Palestinians like everywhere.
Well, hang on, you should change that. They don't want Gaza with the Palestinians.
Yeah, but there's just so many Palestinians on it. It's like we can't really do. I mean, they used to have some settlements in Gaza, but that was disengagement, right? They dismantled the settlements. They had the really crazy people that wanted. These people were living in Gaza before, right? And then they dismantled it. They pulled out. They let them govern themselves. But West Bank is
that was a concession, right? That was a concession. They were trying to be cool. Also, that's like after some other expansions, so it's not like it's still.
There's a disengagement strategy. I mean, it saves them money, and they build up a wall. And essentially, they built up the wall. West Bank, there's a lot more territory in the West Bank, right? So the Israelis and the settlers can pursue like an inch by inch, generation upon generational encroachment of these lands, rather than you can't politically like grab the Palestinians and like throw them out the door like in a cartoon or something. So they'll buy this farm, and then the Palestinians usually won't sell to the Jews, but every once in a while because they'll get more money, and so they'll just buy like incrementally property, and then they'll also build these settlements where it's like a gated community and it has like fences around it, but it's like deep in sort of like the Palestinian area is kind of like an undeveloped sector here. But they pick the good spots, like up on a hill. It's got a good view. It's defensible. Access to water. The Palestinians are not getting, there's all types of issues of like who's getting the water from the Jordan River, because that's really the only source of water around there.
I feel bad for the Palestinian people. They're being used as a puppet by every single person involved.
Yeah, of course. They're
one of the worst fates on Earth right now is probably to be a Palestinian person. Like North Korean would be pretty bad, Palestinian would be pretty bad, Yemeni probably be pretty bad.
I mean, it's kind of a toss-up. Would you rather be a Palestinian, Afghan, in one of these like Central American drug republics? I don't know. I mean, talking about what's going to happen after the conflict is over, Israel is going to be stuck owning Gaza. And in the beginning of this strategy, they moved into northern Gaza because that's really where it was like a hotbed for the Hamas guys, and that's where they took a lot of the hostages and planned this attack. They flattened that, pushed all the people out of northern Gaza, and they're trying to dismantle these tunnels and really get control of like northern Gaza. The intention was they pushed them south, the next biggest city, which is Khan Yunis, and then obviously Hamas moved to Khan Yunis in the south, and now they started bombing there because they want to kill these Hamas dudes. And so now the regular people in Khan Yunis, they're moving even further south to Rafah, which is right on the border of Egypt. And then there's this corridor there, like basically the border with Egypt. It's called the Philadelphia corridor. And so the Israelis are considering essentially like pushing in on the very southernmost end of the Gaza Strip, cutting off the Egyptian border, cutting off those tunnels, those smuggling tunnels that Hamas needs to get out and to get stuff in. And that would entail essentially plowing right through Rafah. And then essentially you're going to get into like an encirclement of Khan Yunis now and the rest of southern Gaza.
Slowly, like a boa constrictor, squeeze them in until they're all in Egypt.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be, I don't know if they could make it to the sea, through there, because it's just going to be like such a grind. And I mean, it's like a huge refugee camp. There's going to be so many innocent civilians everywhere. They're not going to be able to tell who is who. And then, but the thing is, they really want to get to these top Hamas guys, and conveniently for them, the top Hamas guys have all the hostages around them, so you've got them in the same spot. So they're basically looking for these hostage-surrounded senior Hamas people that are in these tunnels under Khan Yunis. And, when they find them, it's like the guy's got 20 hostages, and they're all like rigged up with explosives and stuff like that. So it's like,
how do you defeat that?
Yeah. So, Egypt is necessary. They've got to keep, if they push through and fight in Rafah and try to cut them off and really put this move, do this like pincer movement, I guess you could call it, or just like encirclement movement on what's left of Hamas down there, then the Egyptians are going to get pissed off. The Egyptians are necessary for any hostage deal negotiations, and
are they?
They want the Egyptians want to make sure that all the Palestinians don't just like flood into Egypt. Like if the Israelis go too medieval on the operations here, there'll be like a panic, and then you'll have basically all these Palestinians just like rush the Egyptian border, like at the southern United States border, and just like push in, and then they'll just essentially be in the Sinai Peninsula, and then it'll be Egypt's problem, which is like the last thing they want.
Which is what Israel does want.
Oh, of course.
That should be Israel's greatest goal. Like, and in a sense that I don't want to say should be Biden's goal, but like Biden's goal should just be to be neutral and prevent like total explosion in the region. Let the Israelis finish it while the U.S. provides top cover, I guess. And I know that sounds terrible, but I feel like that's the way to go.
If they forcibly eject all these Palestinians from, it's going to trigger a larger war. Hezbollah will go in the north.
So how do you entice?
Uprising in the West Bank, other, Arab countries might go crazy or whatever. Iran could do more,
How do you make it enticing? We're thinking about it the wrong way right now. Like, we're thinking about it in the terms of force and relocation as opposed to enticement.
Well, it's politics, right? I mean, they don't have to go. The Israelis don't have to negotiate. And
if you slowly move the population, then the Hamas that's left over, easier targets as well. But I mean, that's still, when you mention the leftover Hamas, like that's just...
Well, Hamas is going to move with the population. They can't be caught out in the open because they'll just be destroyed. So wherever the population goes, that's where Hamas goes. Which is why you can't just wax them all. You know what I mean?
There's got to be a way to defeat that.
Fair fight. The next topic on this Israel update really is the high proportion of friendly fire as a proportion of total deaths in Gaza from the Israeli operations. They're saying that this is Israel's most complex war, and it is the most complex hostage situation, in the history of hostages, probably. Like I said, they're using the hostages to protect the leaders because then they know Israel wants the leaders, and they also want to protect the hostages. So it's like, that strategy. The Israelis have 5 divisions deployed in Gaza right now. They started with 160,000 active duty, and then after October 7th, they tripled their ready forces with 360,000 reservists. So you're basically 2-to-1 reservists over professional full-time military. They've got high levels of friendly fire, and it's just, professionally trained soldiers don't really shoot each other like this. You know what I mean? This is showing, and the reason they shot those hostages and stuff, it's showing that these are not very poorly trained troops. They are trained. They are not trained for what they're going into, and you really can't train for this hostage situation like this. But
this is the most crazy urban combat since Fallujah, probably.
That's true, but you're also dealing with 2-to-1 reservists, and they're not really trained to go in there like this, obviously, and they've been shooting each other. There's a lot of accidents as well. People getting run over by tanks, this and that. So looking at the numbers, it could be 10 to 15% are friendly fire,
which is actually quite low. So I wanted to comment on that. So I looked in the United States casualties in the Persian Gulf War, which was the first Gulf War in the early 90s. There were 383 total U.S. deaths. 148 of those were combat. 235 were other. So that's not just friendly fire, but that's 63% or so. Like, that's mostly non-combat deaths. So that's going to be some friendly fire, and some of those combat deaths might have been friendly fire as well. So I just think that's actually not that incredibly high in the grand scheme of things.
Considering this urban environment, it's just a different war. The Persian Gulf War was not urban, and there were some friendly fire incidents, but it
should have been easier to prevent. But we had a higher rate. So I'm saying
those troops were not as highly trained as they would be today, too.
Yeah. But that also shows the effectiveness of our fighting force in the Persian Gulf War.
And yes, these friendly fires do happen in the highest, most trained special ops units. It happens. It just is more infrequent. But they're sending these young people in there to Gaza. They're emotional, and they're not trained for this. They probably cannot be trained for this. And not only are they probably killing a lot of civilians, they're probably killing a lot of each other by accident. So, obviously they don't want to do. It's kind of predictable. But last topic in the Israel news is this idea that has been put forward by essentially the liberal pro-Palestinian side, that there is a disproportionate number of Palestinian journalists in the Gaza Strip that are being killed. When you compare it to World War II, when you compare it to Ukraine and Russia, when you compare it to other conflicts, they're saying this aid group or this think tank or whatever group is saying that 76 journalists have been killed since October 7th. Local sources are saying it's more than 100. They're estimating there were about 1,000 1,000 journalists in Gaza before the war. So they're looking at potentially like a 10% being killed. And some of them, they're alleging that some of them are like targeted, you know what I mean? And some of them are, from international news sources. They just are Arab journalists. They're marked, they got body armor stuff, and they really are instances of them just being killed for no reason. And whatever happens inside Gaza, who knows? Now then, the Israelis say, these people are sympathizers. They're not really journalists. They're propagandists, or they're working with the enemy or whatever. So it is a gray area, but based on these statistics, they're making this argument that it's a campaign essentially against these journalists. Maybe not to kill all of them, but to scare the shit out of them, so maybe they are not out there as much, like to cow them a bit.
I would say that any fallen Hamas fighter is going to be labeled a journalist at this point. Like, that'd be just a smart tactic. Oh, he was not actually a fighter. He was a journalist doing this exact mission. It's just going to be a modification of tactics, because if they have a phone on them and you're an Israeli reservist out there in New Stalingrad, and somebody walks up with a cell phone saying that they're a news reporter, well, are they recording your position for future artillery strikes? Or are they actually a news reporter? And they're a news reporter that's like probably still not on your side, and they're probably just giving that information to the enemy. So I just don't think there is such a thing as a news reporter in this case. And one of the things I thought was funny, having news reporters embedded with military is like a new thing that the United States was doing as kind of a propaganda thing. I think during the Vietnam War was when it was really first started. And then
embedded reporters, yeah.
But and so like when it mentions like there's been more killed than in all of World War II, and it's like, well, yeah, it's because it just wasn't a thing in World War II because it's a terrible idea to have news reporters embedded with the military. It just doesn't. It's just a bad idea usually.
They had news reporters in World War II, man. I mean, come on. Stars and Stripes, like
I don't think that's like a U.S. military. That's like a combat comm type thing. That's different. That's not like I don't think there was like a single person from NBC who jumped in with the 81st Airborne.
Yeah, I don't think they had that back then. You know, it's just like in a regular war. It's, you know, it's an occupation. It's a low intensity conflict. I mean, it got pretty high intensity there for a bit, but essentially it's a low intensity conflict. The Israelis had to kind of dial things back just because of how bad it was looking with all the bombs. They were dropping like unguided bombs and like big ones, you know, like that.
They were destroying blocks. I saw
the smallest bombs that they could be using. They're just like, that one looks good over there, you know? I mean, they didn't even have GPS on it. They're just like dropping these bombs.
Well, if you know something needs to be blown up, that's okay. But it does.
If that's even what you're aiming at. Like, they're like, whoops, shouldn't have done that one. You know what I mean? Like, I get that they're angry, but, you know, when you look at it, it doesn't make sense.
What you're going to say is when you look at it, it's not proportional. Like it doesn't. I just feel like if you hit, we hit back really hard, not proportionally. That's the way I like to do.
You can do anything you want. It's a war, you know. I mean, there's no law saying you have to do proportional or not or whatever. I mean, it's kind of like good manners if you're like a liberal democracy to be proportional. But obviously, the enemy knows what we're going to do, and we can talk about it because cool. All right. Well, that wraps up. We're going to put Dibbs back in now and get to talking about the rest of the articles. Thanks, Mason.
Sure. Man, every once in a while, I think about getting into politics. And it's times like this that I'm glad I am not.
All right, you done?
Yes.
Next topic that's interesting this week is the realization that NATO severely underestimated, also NATO led by the United States of America, severely underestimated the capability of the Russians to build and acquire artillery ammo and the ability of the Russians to replenish their manpower.
I disagree with that. I think we severely overestimated both of those things.
Okay. Okay. Let me say the argument and then we'll talk about it. So Russia currently is producing more artillery ammo than all of Europe combined, and they are prepared for a long-term conflict. The artillery balance from last summer was Ukraine was shooting 7,000 a day, Russia was shooting 5,000 a day. Now Ukraine is shooting 2,000 and Russia is shooting 10,000. The reason for Russia's increase is their increased domestic production, because they essentially took these factories and are like, you're an artillery factory now. And a lot of that is coming online. And they went to North Korea. North Korea has the biggest stockpile of this ammo in the world, and they're not really fighting anymore right now. So they bought North Korean ammo. So now the Russians have ammo. We know about Putin's mobilization. They have repopulated their army. They are using human wave attacks, which are effective. And the Ukrainians essentially are running out of men. The Ukrainians don't have any men left really to serve. So I personally see it as a major blunder. I mean, not as long as Afghanistan, but we essentially lost this war with bad advice, bad training, and just our strategy botched it, essentially. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't remember NATO losing this war. I mean, they've gained members because of this war. It's drawn some of the other member states back together.
But they're losing the actual war. Okay, you've got like a couple new members, but it's like, does that even help?
The map really doesn't show that Ukraine is losing the war.
Ukraine's
like not even close.
Like about to collapse, dude.
Perhaps the map doesn't really reflect that, though. The frontline trace does not reflect that at all.
Once the collapse happens, the map will collapse, and then Russia will advance further, claim half of Ukraine.
Sure, maybe, but people have been saying that for 2 years. So,
but what happened? What happened to the Ukrainian counteroffensive? What happened to the counteroffensive? I thought we were going to be marching to the border of Russia. Well, yeah, the American generals. Well, the American generals gave them the winning strategy, right? What happened?
I wasn't there. I'm not sure exactly what happened,
Yeah,
but the frontline trace does not show that Russia has conquered Ukraine. They've done a really terrible job at that, actually.
Yeah, but they're going to win.
Piss poor.
Yeah, we've done a piss poor job.
Dude, they've totally been going to win since February from 2 years ago.
The counteroffensive was a mistake. There shouldn't have ever been a counteroffensive. Ukraine should have always been on defense because Russia outnumbers them 5-1. They're always going to run out of men.
Yeah, I keep hearing that.
You further exacerbated the problem by setting them up for failure on the counteroffensive, overriding their strategy, forcing them to take your strategy, not giving them air support, and all of their young men that were lined up for that counteroffensive got all cut down, and there's no one left. And now
last I heard, they were allowed to make their own strategic decisions, regardless of any Western advisors that may exist.
No, Milley and Austin overruled them.
Not only do I not buy that, but their commanders themselves have said that they have tactical and strategic independence as far as their own decision making, and they have said that they have flat out said that they sometimes ignore Western advice.
Okay, well, what happened was whether they took the Western advice was followed. Okay, that's a fact because they massed armor in the southeast and they tried to break through to cut Crimea off, which is what the generals told them they could do because their war games said they could do it. They did 6 war games and Ukraine can bust through, but Ukraine didn't have air cover. Ukraine couldn't get their military vehicles out there and it would turn into a graveyard. And
since the 1800s, Crimea has been an extremely strategic place for any conflict in the region. So I would hesitate to say that anything attempting to take strategic advantage of cutting off Crimea would be like a modern Western strategy because people have been doing that. People have been attempting to do that for hundreds of years.
I mean, the idea of cutting off the land is fine, but the Ukrainians didn't have the air cover. They didn't have the training. The Russians had too long to dig in. They couldn't get through the minefields, and the vehicles weren't properly outfitted, and we got them killed. And they abandoned the plan within 4 days. So obviously, it was a big failure. And now they can't even play defense anymore because you squandered all their resources with your big war game simulation plan. I mean, this is how we lose.
I'm going to have to see that frontline trace move before I'm convinced.
We're going to lose this. If we had just played defense and kept them alive, we'd be in a lot better spot than playing, hand of God on the battlefield there.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, largely from Russian-connected sources.
I don't know. I mean, the strategy is a failure. I mean, in this NATO, they underestimated Russia. We don't have. How do we win this now? Even if Congress passes the Ukraine money, which newsflash, not gonna fucking happen. Then what? Are we gonna arm their children? Are we gonna have a child army? Or we could do the old ladies? I mean, who's gonna run at the Russians and pull the trigger? Because there's no one left. How do you win the war?
I don't claim to have a solution. I also don't really have numbers on the population of the Ukrainian army.
All right, we're going to talk about conscription in the Ukrainian army. So they don't have enough volunteers. The Ukrainian army wants 450,000 to 500,000 men to go in, but they've essentially churned through all their military-age males. The people most recently that have been going up are 45, 50, 55-year-old men. So it's illegal to leave the country of Ukraine as a man if you're 18 to 60. But they're saying things like they don't want to die and that they will just be pushed to the front line. There's Telegram channels and stuff where people who do go come back and say things are incorrectly done, where they say, hey, you're not going to be on the front line. We're going to give you a desk job or something like that. And then a week later, they're front line, buddy. And then they message back. And so then the guys that are back don't want to do it later. And they're worried that they're going to be cannon fodder. We all know the situation on the front line is really bad.
I feel like I've read this article, except instead of it saying Ukraine at the top, it said Russia. You could just replace the name and it's almost word for word.
Okay, so they're saying that they think about 20,000 men have left Ukraine. You're looking at about 1% to 5%. That's what the Ukrainians are saying. But you can't trust their numbers. So you're probably saying this this kind of desertion. I mean,
no, but I have friends that go there fairly regularly. So
it costs $13,000 or $1,300, and it'll give you a guide, like a coyote, to get you across the border into somewhere. Yeah, I mean, there's no one in Ukraine left that wants to fight. I mean, that's fact of the matter. You know, they're not going to have the money.
The line isn't collapsing, so like objectively, there's no way to say there's no one left to fight in Ukraine, because if it were, tanks would be in Kyiv, or however you pronounce it, Kyiv, whatever. I don't know.
Well, let's say it's a stalemate. Then what? Okay, so it's a stalemate. This is not looking good, but it's a stalemate. What happens then? What do we do? I mean,
it kind of has been since 2014, hasn't it?
Well, there's no more money. So the Republicans are not going to allow basically any more money to go over there. So there's no more money.
It's been a stalemate for 9-10 years now already.
Stalemate of what?
Donbass and Crimea, man. Surely you knew this isn't the first time Russia's invaded Ukraine in our lives.
Yeah, but I mean, we put a lot into it and we're going to lose. And, you know, and our strategy is the one that did it. Our dumb generals are the ones that screwed the pooch again. And this is right after Kabul.
Evidence of that has really surfaced yet.
These are the same motherfuckers that fucked up Kabul. They did an about face. They went straight into Ukraine, jammed their grubby little fingers into that, fucked that up too. Sorry. I mean, that's the way I see it.
I mean, it's kind of unfair for you to even bring that up, because it's kind of a topic that I can't talk about.
I'm just saying what I gotta say. I mean, but I don't like it. I think we need to be winning these wars, and we're losing everything. And we spend a ton of money. And everybody's getting rich. All right, so next we got 2 Navy SEALs lost from SEAL Team 3 that we're looking for 11 days. And I don't know. What do you think?
It's a pretty tragic story, man. The dude attempting to board the ship that ended up between the small vessel that they were using to do that and into the sea in body armor. I mean, that's pretty tragic. The dude that went after him that died, I mean, that's both tragic and pretty heroic.
NSW operator, 2nd class, Nathan Gage Ingram is the SEAL who fell in. And then NSW 1st class, Chris Chambers is the one who went in after him. They were deployed off USS Lewis B. Puller. And yeah, they did an 11-day search. Now, I did a little bit on last week's talk about this, because when I filmed that video, they hadn't called off the search yet. So yes, it looks like they won't find their bodies because they were out at sea or whatever. But the thing that was bothering me about this was that the president wasn't talking about it, and none of the DC generals were talking about it. Yes, in CENTCOM, in theater, in the talk, people are talking about it. People know these guys are missing. People are doing missions. They're going to find them. They're hoping. There's in classified and chatting. And I understand that. I understand people care about this. But these motherfuckers in DC do not give a shit. They came to their briefing without information about it. They didn't even mention it. They had no response when asked about it. The president doesn't know anything about it. And I think it's just ass backwards. I think that, that's just the beginning of this. My personal take on this, though, is that I think this is bullshit. I don't trust them at all. I find it way too convenient that Nathan Ingram just slipped. Oh, he slipped. He's under the waves. We did our best. You know what I mean? And I feel like there's some kind of dirty little secret here. You can already see that there's a 5th Fleet investigation, which is you want to figure out what happened. But again, this is these people investigating themselves. These are the people that brought us Pat Tillman. These are the people that brought us all these lies, the Kabul righteous strike and everything. And I don't think it's common for SEALs to fall off these fucking ladders. I mean, I know it sucks, and I know you got gear and stuff, but this is the dude's fucking job. And we've been on these ladders, not really any reason you need to be falling off, and I find it very convenient.
That's not exactly true. I mean,
all these
we've been on these exact ladders, hanging off a helo or on an obstacle course or something, but I've seen enough to know that when you're on a small boat attempting to board a moving ship that's underway, it's not the same as doing it on a PT field.
I find it suspicious that all these Navy SEALs go out into the media and they talk about how dangerous this mission is and how hard it is and how things like this happen. I feel like it's coordinated. And they knew they weren't going to find these dudes. Okay. Like that's, the 11-day search isn't to find these two. They're gone. That is for the guys who are left to know that if it happens to them, that we'll at least look for them. But like these guys were already basically written off. Something happened. Somebody fucked these guys, whether it was making the call on the mission, saying that we should do it or we shouldn't do it, whether the weather was good enough, or there's something that these people did that caused this. And I don't believe them. And I would like to see the investigation. I don't think it'll come out if it is a cover up or whatever like that, but somebody knows what happened, because I just see it as too convenient. It's just like, oh, yep, it's a normal thing, there they go. Get 2 new ones. Like, I just don't.
I mean, didn't we talk 10 minutes ago about most deaths in the GWAT being from accident rather than enemy action? Statistically, I have no reason to dispute this, though I have absolutely no inside information of the investigation either. I mean, I don't really know.
Yeah, because they lie to us. They control the information. They manipulate everything. Like, of course they're not going to give us some press release that's like, hey, we might have fucked this one up, guys. No, they'll just do an investigation. 3 months down the line, they'll release like some investigation. No one will read it. There'll be some other story going on. I mean, this is how these people play games. This is some bureaucrat bullshit. My bullshit detector is online. I feel it in my bones. And I find it very suspicious that they weren't updating us along the way.
I think it's irrational that you think that there's no chance that this will ever come out. I mean, we found out what happened with Tillman. We've all read, or at least I have, the accident report with what happened with Jimmy Patton when he died. I'm not saying that everything is necessarily guaranteed to be forthcoming. I really don't know that. I don't even know what their investigation process looks like. But we do usually figure out what happened with these things.
Yeah, but they cover it up and delay it until, the people that could be held accountable are to the 4 winds. And the public has lost attention. Nobody even fucking remembers it anymore. It's a bureaucratic political tactic. And I can just feel it. They did something wrong. Like, they shouldn't have been on that mission. They should have gone at it from a different direction. There's some decision, or they didn't have the right gear, or they didn't have the right training, and some officer overrode them and was like, nah, you go out there and do it because Joe Biden wants it tonight or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, something happened.
Bro, I am far from qualified to comment on which direction or process to attack a ship from. Like, I'm just
saying
far from qualified.
Something fucking happened. This does not seem right to me personally. Related to this, these guys are out there because they're going on this boat that was bringing weapons to the Houthi rebels in Yemen. This same regional issue, this isn't exactly the same, but Al-Assad Air Base, which is also getting these Iranian, this is a major base, it's getting these Iranian attacks, not from the Houthis. They
do get attacked quite frequently.
Yeah, these like militia groups that are like on the border between Iran and Iraq. And so they did a complex layered attack with 17 rockets that overwhelmed the air defenses at Al-Assad base, and there were direct hits and injuries. I personally see Iran as having the upper hand in this fight. And they've kind of got us in Yemen, and they just caused us to lose 2 SEALs indirectly, whatever you want to say about it. And they're hitting our bases in Iraq. We can't really do anything to them. I mean, they're not exposed to us. They have the upper hand on us. And then we're launching planes, dropping bombs on rocket launch sites that are basically just a pile of dirt in the middle of nowhere in Yemen. I mean, a rocket launch site is just like a field or something. You know what I mean? This isn't like critical infrastructure, right? We just saw, I don't know if you saw the news, but they just launched a rocket directly at one of these American ships out there, which shot it down. But I mean, like directly at one of our ships rather than like a shipping container ship. You've been following this regional stuff here?
Yeah, a little bit, man. A little bit. I don't really have much commentary on this topic, though.
Boring. All right. Maybe you can talk about the Chinese dark matter lab.
So I actually didn't read that article because I read the title and it was like 10 words that could have been summed up in 3. And the rest of the words were inserted into the headline to make it extra dramatic. But I'll attempt to demystify the topic a little bit for people. When you hear a scientist use the word dark or black, it's describing something that we think exists over there. We've detected that there's like something that we might not have expected, and we don't know how to define it yet because we don't know what the fuck it is. So like black holes, for example, are named for that because it was a source of gravity in the galaxy that we were unable to account for. Dark matter is kind of like that too. So when you launch some space probes and they decelerate at a rate that is not expected by the engineers and the physicists, then you know that the matter count in the universe is not what you thought that it was. So that's dark matter kind of in a nutshell. And in this case, it kind of sounds like it's some kind of weird scaremongering thing.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It's a little bit clickbait or whatever. We can talk about it. Dark matter, dark matter. Yeah. That's what they say they're researching here, but really it's a physics lab. Okay. And like Dibbs said, we don't really know that much about physics. I mean, we know a lot and you learn it in high school and whatever, but like, in reality, these physics guys, like, they're still trying to figure stuff out. Like, we don't really understand what's going on, like Dibbs said with the dark matter. So this lab is a physics lab, but what's unique about it, it is underground, right? So you're basically, this is like a military facility. It is hardened against an attack. So obviously something important is going on there, or they intend, it's not really open yet, but they intend for something important to go on. The Jinping Underground Physics Lab, which phase 1 began in 2010, and then they essentially just completed phase 2, 2023, but it's supposed to be at FOC at the end of 24 this year. At the end of this year, it'll be operating, and they'll be doing physics research in there. You have to assume that it's going to be related to the military. I don't think it's bad they have physics labs. I mean, we have physics labs, and we have military physics labs and stuff. I mean, okay, I mean, it is extremely far down under the ground. I mean, this is the most buried deep in the earth physics lab on the earth. I mean, they put this motherfucker like way down. So you have to assume that they want to put something in there that's very important. So interesting. Just thought it was good bringing in here.
I think it's likely to be military related, but I mean, to say that like they're experimenting with militarizing or weaponizing dark matter is like shows like whoever would write that or say that is so naive to the basic concepts of the terms of science that it's hard to take them as credible.
They're not saying they're weaponizing dark matter. They're saying a dark matter lab, which is kind of like a catch-all term.
Oh God, they're trying to detect matter that we're not sure how to interact with yet. It's pretty vague, man.
I mean, they're obviously doing military research. I mean, if it was benign civilian research, they wouldn't have put it, 1,500 meters below like a mountain.
Maybe that big ass collider in Europe is underground.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so, but I mean, we all know what they're doing. Maybe it is a little bit clickbait, but I thought it was cool and interesting that they put it so far down. But yes. All right. Staying on China, they've got us by the balls on the rare earth minerals, right? So this report is saying that 2 rare earth minerals useful for semiconductors, gallium and germanium, in 2023, they've essentially been cut off, but it was like midway through the year. So in 2023, China controls 95% of the world's gallium, and that dropped by 2/3, 66% in exports to the US. China controls 60% of the world's germanium, and that dropped by 8%. And they're saying that we should be expecting further retaliation. Yeah. So, this is in response to the AI chips. We don't let them have the chips, so they don't let us have the minerals that we need to build the chips. And this is affecting the United States and Japan, probably also Korea as well. So what do you think?
So I think this actually is very much something to be potentially concerned about. I mean, those aren't the only rare earth minerals or uncommon minerals that China has kind of controlled, taken steps to have a controlling share of in their time. And some of those things are pretty important. Tungsten always comes to mind. Lithium comes to mind. But the gallium and germanium thing, those are important. Those are militarily important metals. Germanium is used in the manufacture of like optical sensors and stuff like that. I don't think that's really very uncommon knowledge, but I think gallium, I don't really know a lot about it, but I think it's pretty heavily used in the computer industry, right?
These are the raw inputs that are used in order to make the high-tech computer chips that we are withholding from them. They were not, say 10 years ago or whenever this started, they were not able to do the chips themselves. They would have loved that. They were able to capture this market because they don't care about tearing up their environment, and they heavily subsidize it because they realized that they would get us by the balls, and they knew they were going to need this someday. This is like one of their aces. These minerals exist in the world, and we could get them, but we're just not set up to do it right now because you have to set up the industry for it and everything. And we were getting it cheap from them. So what's happening is most Western companies and stuff like that have stockpiles. We've seen this coming, and so we stockpile. They stockpile the chips, we stockpile the minerals. So now we're in this little bit of volatile zone where they're trying to figure it out, we're trying to figure it out. What the experts are saying is that this will result in higher costs. Not we're not going to have any. It's just the cost of everything is going to go up, which is like an inflation, I guess. And then US and Japan have to immediately diversify our sources, obviously, because we're depending on 95% of the gallium from China, which that doesn't make sense, right? So it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, that could be a strategic problem. I could see that being a strategic problem. I don't really know the exact percentages of what comes from where on that, but everything I read about that indicates that that is an important mineral to be concerned about. I also saw in that article you sent me that graphite was important with this. What do you think about that?
I am not really been studying up on exactly what each of these different minerals and how they fit into the different. These are very niche production processes. This one part of making a CPU chip, or this one part of doing this. I haven't been too deep into that. What I'm interested in is the sources and the supply chain, because we have this high-tech supply chain, and it's geography independent, right? It doesn't matter where you make microchips. If you're mining coal, you got to be near where the coal is. If you're mining gold, you got to be near where the gold is. But, we can make these chips anywhere, but we need the expertise, and there's a lot of infrastructure and planning that goes into making these chips. And then we obviously need the raw materials. So we're in this arm wrestling match with China, and they've got the minerals and we've got the IP. We have the IP and we control the very top of the chips. It's like a knife fight where your hands are tied together, because they can hurt us, we can hurt them. We're probably both going to die from it if we get into a big fight.
Interesting. I've noticed that a lot of other carbon based things are commonly made in China, graphene and carbon nanotubes and stuff like that. I think that's largely due to the absolute lack of health regulations, because powdered carbon nanotubes is a extreme health hazard, probably worse than asbestos powder. I think that might be why those things, but it's kind of interesting to me that, carbon being literally everywhere on Earth, they're kind of known for whatever control of carbon products sometimes.
There's a whole panoply of these minerals. It's just any one mineral can kind of mess things up or whatever, but they've moved in to control all of them, and they'll control all of this. Because, if you're a company doing one, you're probably going to be selling the others and so on and so forth. And they've also consolidated their rare earth mining industry into a few players. They've gotten ready for this, right? They're ready to cut us off, and they've already basically done that. So, we'll see what happens, but we'll keep paying attention to it.
Well, a communist country consolidating industries under a limited number of umbrellas is hardly surprising. But yeah, I could definitely see that having an impact potentially.
Yeah, it's going to be easier after they consolidate these companies. So, talking now about the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Replacement Program, the Sentinel missile program, replacing the Minuteman III missile that we've had since the 1970s. We talked about the launch capsules at the Air Force bases in the upper Midwest. And these Minuteman missiles are old. They probably work. I assume they work and everything, but they're not modern, and we really need to replace these missiles. If we don't have these missiles, any country who does have them can basically bully us, because they can be I just push this button and New York goes bye-bye, And so we have to be don't do that, because I can push this button, and that's nuclear strategy. So, they want to replace these. Even if they do this, the replacement's not even expected to be online until 2030. But they're at the beginning of this program, and it's blowing up, obviously. They're saying that this is the largest, most complex program ever. And I know, and everyone knows, that they're not doing good at doing large, complex projects like this. The unit cost per missile jumped by 37% from an estimated $118 million to $162 million. And that triggered the Nunn-McCurdy Act, which triggers an automatic financial review if, these program costs like balloon up, because it's like a ripoff, right? It's like the Big Dig in Massachusetts, or it's like one of these cannot fail, no competition, government, like largesse projects, especially these ones that we have to have. Like, there's no canceling this. And so the little goblins are like working their way in there, and they're just trying to figure out how to get as much as they can. It's like rats, like eating a piece of cheese. Oh, you forgot about this. You forgot about this. We need more money for this. And they're like trying to jack it up as much as possible. They're saying that what it is, in fact, is a vast real estate civil engineering program, which sounds very expensive. And Mike Rogers from Alabama, Republican, says failure is not an option. What do you think about this program, Dibbs?
I don't really know much about the finances of it or exactly why it would go over. I know this certainly isn't the first large government project to go over budget.
It's supposed to cost $96 billion.
But I also know it's like far from impossible. I mean, we've been making things launch into space and then land in specific spots for a very long time.
I think it's actually a very good value, because I know that in the last war, we were getting, for $118 million, a single Afghan police station. So this seems like a bargain to me. I mean, if you think about it, $96 billion, that's only 10 times as much as we spent on the entire Afghan National Police, which doesn't exist anymore. So it's actually a really good deal, comparatively, right?
I see where you're going with that, but I honestly, dude, I don't even know what it costs to build them in the first place. I know this stuff is very expensive.
Yeah, but the bureaucrats are getting in there. I mean, they're going to extract as much money as possible. I mean, that's the game here. And there's no goalie. There's no one being like stopping the puck. It's just like goal, 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 goal. And they probably triggered this act by accident. If they just come in, if they just gouge the government for 34.5% increase, they probably could have gone without even like anyone even noticing, and they could have made their money. But they triggered this review, and now the department has to review this program. This is a ripoff. I mean, this is like the big ripoff. This is like the next big ripoff. Just wait for this one to come out. I mean, Jesus. And we'll never shoot one of these missiles ever. We'll never ever shoot one. They just have to be there. They just have to be there.
I think intercontinental ballistic research has been historically tied very closely to space exploration research since like 1940 something. Whether or not that'll be fruitful, I don't really know, but just throwing that out there.
Yeah, there was probably some overlap in the beginning. I don't think building new intercontinental ballistic missiles is helping civilian space. Maybe, yeah, I don't know.
I'd be shocked if it wasn't.
I think they've diverged, maybe.
I mean, what do you think a Soyuz rocket is servicing the International Space Station?
Or is it just
it's literally a ballistic missile launch device.
Well,
like quite literally, like essentially unmodified.
Is it intercontinental though?
Like, this is very well known. Yeah, it's straight up an ICBM launcher. Yeah,
it makes sense. They have limited resources. It makes sense for them to multi-purpose. Design a multi-purpose.
Well, I mean, all the things they try to design to go to space that weren't ballistic missile launch devices mostly failed.
All right, talking about UFOs now, and I like talking about this intersection between UFOs and the military. And this guy came out this week, UFO expert. It's this talk, where, yes, people have been talking about UFOs since before we were born, and, it's had this stigma of your crazy conspiracy. They use this to discredit it because obviously the government hasn't been covering this up for a long time. So there's these UFO experts who kind of have denied the stigma over their career. So they've been doing this.
That have like no title whatsoever except I'm a UFO expert.
Yeah, exactly. And they're
for what I saw in the article.
They've done their research. Where are you going to go to UFO University or something? I mean, it's crazy. So like
there's this thing called astrobiologists, there's astrophysicists and astronomers and cosmologists, a lot of people that study alien life or attempt to.
Basically these UFO enthusiasts have been starting to get connected with these, I wouldn't say they're disgruntled former employees of this government cover-up enterprise, but it's like they're just disheartened. Like they want people to know the truth or more of the truth. They might not want everyone, but like they're whistleblowers just because they think people should know the truth. And, you know, like David Grush and some other whistleblowers. But these people actually worked in the government and are closer to what's going on rather than just some quack civilian who's out in Pennsylvania and gets abducted by aliens, and that none of us believe them because they could just be on drugs or they could be making
I don't know,
up.
man. They kind of sound like pissed off privates to me when I started.
Well, yeah, that doesn't explain the news. That doesn't explain that it's happening now versus before. Like, why wasn't this happening before? And then it also doesn't explain, you know, so many of them, because it's not just one pissed off guy. None of them seem pissed off. They don't really seem to have an axe to grind. Like, their thing is they're like, hey, we think this should be more common knowledge. And then, like, it's kind of hard to derive what benefit they're getting out of it. Like, they're upending their lives. They're making themselves look like putting themselves out there.
Flat earthers do that every day.
What? But these are like government contractors and military type people that are coming out, and the pilots that are training in Virginia, they see the UFOs and stuff like that. So it's just a new era where the military is starting to have to acknowledge that there's UFOs are out there. They're not acknowledging the aliens, but then the whistleblowers kind of latch onto that and are like pushing the issue to be like, release more, release more, release more. So anyway, this guy, Michael Shrat, is essentially talking about some of his research, but then also his ideas about what he thinks we're dealing with. And it lines up with recent David Grush, his big testimony before Congress that was public. And he also did private as well. So he says, there is a rogue element of the military-industrial complex that is targeting, tracking, and shooting these things down to exploit their propulsion systems, weapon systems, and free energy systems applications. That's what I think what we are dealing with here.
So this is actually like a really classic example of why conspiracy theories in general are very hard to really get behind. How many hundreds of thousands of people?
What makes you even classify as a conspiracy theory? I mean, that's just like a stigmatizing.
It literally is. There's this dude saying there's this massive conspiracy in the United States military to cover up shooting down spacecraft. Like, how many people can really keep that a secret, man?
Saying.
Dude, if we were shooting down spacecraft, we'd probably be bragging about it. I would be.
I mean, dude, I don't know. This has been going on since before.
I mean, that's really cool.
There's a new book that came out documenting it. We've got whistleblowers up in front of Congress. People are coming out the woodwork. I mean, to just be like this old, like, well, if you're really a conspiracy theorist, you might think this. I mean, these people are investigating this stuff. I mean, like,
and keep in mind, I'm 100% convinced that aliens exist. I mean, it's very difficult to get past Drake equation. It's really hard to look at that and start thinking that aliens don't exist. But to think that we're like shooting down advanced civilizations that have mastered interstellar travel, I need whatever that dude's on, for real.
It could be interdimensional.
Really awesome stuff.
Dude, obviously, if there is something going on, like, our puny human brains are not like primed to understand what's happening here. Obviously,
and hundreds of thousands of people are keeping this under wraps. Super awesome. When's the last time something that involved hundreds of thousands of people didn't leak?
Okay,
ever?
Who's saying hundreds of thousands of you?
So the idea that the United States military has been shooting down spacecraft or spacecraft.
This is a rogue element. This could be 100 people.
Let me finish. The idea that the military has been shooting down spacecraft or recovering down spacecraft has existed at least since the so-called Roswell incident, which has been very well debunked, by the way. That is generations of people that would have to cover up a massive conspiracy.
No one's saying that everyone in the military is in on it, right? I mean, this is like defense corporations, specialized.
No, but if you've been shooting down spacecrafts for 70 years, like, that's a pretty big secret, man. That's pretty hard to keep under wraps.
Yeah, but you have the generalized stigma in the culture where it's like anyone who talks about aliens, so you're like pre-natured against it. That we didn't have strong whistleblower, and you have two factors where one is the person who's trying to whistleblow is like, they have apprehension of, am I the person who's going to like cause the world to go into a panic and whatever? also, is anyone going to believe me, which they're not? And two, they're also saying that they've had authority to kill these people. So,
bro, if there was like a big secret that somebody had access to, like even if like 5 people had access to a secret that was likely to destabilize the entire globe, it would be on Facebook within 30 fucking seconds.
That's today, yes, because the apprehension.
Yeah, we live in today.
Because of
though.
like the mass media has been chipping away at it, the apprehension is going down, and people are more comfortable with it now. And then as whistleblowers, so it's like Rose McGowan with like Me Too. It's like as soon as somebody went up and started taking on Harvey Weinstein, and all these other women were like, I could get this guy, and then it's like the floodgates open, right? And so we're on an inflection point here where the military is gonna have to start, because they don't know what to do. They have this stuff or whatever, but like there's more of them out there. The Chinese have the shit, the Russians have the shit. I mean, they don't really know what to do.
Man, dude, I find it really hard to believe that a civilization has conquered all of their neighbors enough that they could even bother with interstellar travel without getting smoked.
It could be interdimensional.
Like ancient freaking civilizations that have such advanced technology, they can travel interdimensionally, as you say, or interstellarly, as I say, and they arrive at Earth and we're like shooting them down left and right without anybody even noticing. Like, come on, man. They're saying
that they crash and sometimes we shoot them down. I mean, I don't know. I mean, people are shooting at them. The Russians definitely shooting at them. The Chinese probably shooting at them. And apparently we're shooting at them too. So,
I don't know, man. That would be like, I don't even know how to describe that.
All right. I know it's hard to wrap your noodle around and everything, but what the hypothesis here is basically that around in 1954, is when they actually got one of these alien craft to fly. And I guess assume we had like an American pilot in there flying this UFO around. And they're saying that they've reverse engineered the anti-gravity propulsion. So what he's saying here is, and with the increase, and this is what Brandon has said a lot, which he's saying that he thinks it's our planes, which is like, I get it could be. I mean, it's near America. Like we have planes, it's probably ours. But
bro, there's literal video of this happening in the exact time periods.
I don't really care if it's an American in there doing the UFO stuff or an alien. And yeah, it's probably more probable that it's an American
right about the time, the idea of what a flying saucer would look like, there were literal videos of Air Force or United States Army Air Corps, I think, dudes at the time, experimenting with things that looked an awful lot like flying saucers that they built as experimental aircraft. I mean, like...
Yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, and I get it, but...
We've got plenty of aircraft that look very strange that if I saw it, I would be like, holy shit, that's some alien stuff. If I saw it for the first time, I did not know it was an airplane.
Maybe, but, these
look
are...
Look at the F-117, man. Like, do you look at that thing and think that's an airplane? Or does that look like a freaking spaceship?
There's some cases where it's like a experimental airplane or whatever, but like... These ones where they're defying the laws of physics and it's going in the ocean and it's coming out, and it just like zips away up into, and they can see them on satellite. It's not just the fighter pilot who's like recording it with his cell phone or his like gun camera or something like that. Like they can see these things on satellites. Like the military knows these things are out there and they don't know what the fuck they are. Some of them, they can be explained away. I get that.
So we don't know what they are, but we're shooting them down left and right. Like,
dude. They've got...
You can't have both.
They
either have inconceivably high technology or we're shooting them down left and right. Those two things can't be the same.
Ball hovering over the USS George Washington for like 3.5 hours in 2004. And the entire ship just sat there watching it. And it just like was over top of the ship in the middle of the night. I mean, like, U.S. military people have been... experiencing UFOs. I mean, that we're military veterans, we're covering the veterans. Like, this is a military issue.
I've never experienced a UFO.
I know you haven't and I haven't, but like, these pilots, even the commercial airline pilots are seeing them. I mean, everybody's seeing these UFOs. So it's going to come down at some point. Something's going to happen, but Shrat says that, they've had this tech for a long time. So yeah, a lot of them might be our planes or something but the underlying there is we have this technology and that's being kept from us. And it's like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? the government has this and they're flying around. Like, what are they doing with
technology for interstellar travel?
Who's gaining the benefit from it?
I haven't seen evidence that anybody on Earth has figured out interstellar travel or even has access to technology.
This would be the greatest secret in the history of mankind. So, yeah, I wouldn't expect them to.
I mean, you know how fast we'd militarize that? It'd take about 30 seconds for some country on Earth to figure that one out. Like, you'd have Russian UFOs smoking dudes in Syria right now, or Ukraine.
Something's going on. You know what I mean? Like, this tech is out there, or they don't know how to do it exactly, or they don't know. There's something going on. And that's it. You want to talk about the U.S. military being too thin?
Yeah, so I read that article. It said that we're pretty spread thin. I'm not really all that convinced of that.
Okay, so this is the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank. There's retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel Dakota Wood. And he says basically the U.S. military is too weak to support multiple conflicts, which, traditionally the military is supposed to be able to fight two big wars in two different places. Because if we can't do that, then once we commit in one place and all of our enemies are going to be like, oh, they're committed, let's fuck around with them on the other side of the world. And we're like, nah. Remember World War II. So we were supposed to maintain that deterrent. Although obviously we can't do that, and we need to be geared towards being able to handle many low-intensity conflicts. We shouldn't be invading and taking over anywhere. We should be able to do 4 or 5 small conflicts, manage them well, and not get our people killed. And that's probably the future we're looking for here. But so he says the military is too old, too weak, and too unready. And it did sound pretty aggressive in the beginning when I was reading his stuff, but I did actually agree mostly with most of his analysis, right? So he says with his power rankings, he says the Army is marginal. He says the Navy is weak.
Compared to whom?
Well, compared to the requirements to meet national requirements, right? And basically what he's saying is we only have 75% of the ships that we would need to do major operations. So
we have the most powerful Navy on Earth in terms of tonnage and manpower.
It's about accomplishing the mission. You know what I mean? It doesn't, and plus, are these aircraft carriers obsolete? I mean, if these anti-ship missiles can take out the aircraft carriers, then that negates a lot of our advantage. And
I don't know, man. China doesn't think aircraft carriers are obsolete. They're building them every 30 seconds, but they can't seem to learn how to operate their aviation assets out of them at night or in
aircraft carrier is not part of their core strategy. They're trying to defend using rockets against our aircraft carriers. But
no, dude, aircraft carriers exist for force projection. If they're building aircraft carriers, they intend to have the capability of force projection.
They're not. They've got 1 or 2, but they're just going to have. I mean, they're basically just for home.
They're building several aircraft carriers right now, they have a few operational ones.
Yeah, they have the helicopter ones, so they have the smaller ones. But anyway,
no, they have ski jump ones. Yeah, they absolutely factually have ski jump aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
They just suck at using them at night or in bad weather.
Okay, so we know the Navy just doesn't have as many boats as they say they need. So, and there's just not enough money. The Navy boats are very expensive. Until we can get them automated where there's less crew on them, they're just going to be very expensive. The Air Force, he characterizes as very weak, mainly because of the pilot shortage and the lack of...
The United States has a weak Air Force. Okay, man, that's news to me, dog.
Well, in order to meet...
When's the last time someone has contested us, seriously in open air conflict? And, came out anywhere close to on top?
Well, he's saying that we have this pilot shortage and it's readiness. They don't have the training and they don't have the hours in the cockpit and there's not enough pilots. Now,
dude, our pilots get some of the most hours in the cockpit of any country.
Well, but if there's not enough pilots, then it doesn't matter. So he's saying that. Well, I'm saying that if we can get the AI online, we don't need any fucking pilots. This is ridiculous.
And I'm saying that I think literally everything this dude said is just factually incorrect. To be quite honest.
He says the Marines are very strong, which I found suspicious. But,
yeah, you would.
But
I think those dudes are doing a great job too.
He said the Marines are very strong, but they're too small to really. I mean, yeah, the Marines are small. The
Marine Corps has never been designed to be a large organization.
The Marines have done a full reorg of their battle order and their future of what they're doing because they know that they're going to have to essentially invade Taiwan or something. Hopefully not, but apparently they've already done the forward thinking on this and already implemented it. And so he's saying they're in a strong position, and he's probably right that they're modern and that they're thinking about how to engage in these conflicts and they're getting ready, but too small, obviously. Special forces, he says, is marginal, which I think is probably right. We're kind of in like this, we're in the like bureaucratic stage of the GWOT. I mean, the GWOT's basically over, but we're just in this like permanent special operations, like op tempo globally where, you know, and it's, I don't know if it's a mission creep or whatever. It's like we go in this place, we're out of this place. Like we might get kicked out of Iraq. You know, we go in, now we're in fucking Gaza. You know, we're in and out of all these places. It's very fluid. But I mean, I don't know if special operations is not the future of the military. It's the robotics that we need.
I don't think special operations is dead at all.
You don't think it's what?
I don't think special operations is dead at all. Like,
I say it's dead, but it's not going to be the main effort in the future, because basically at the end of the day, a robot beats a special ops, an operator. And it's way easier to get a robot than it is to replace an operator.
I mean, I know you're the AI dude, but I'm not convinced we're really there yet. I don't think anybody's there yet.
Well, we're not there yet, but I mean, you know, as the technology, I mean, it's an inevitable trend. Just look at the pilots. The pilots are on their way to extinction. So strategic nuclear forces, he says, are ancient, and that they're basically at a tipping point to where they're essentially almost non-functional, or they're just not
there's
modern.
a maintenance process for those things, right? That like we can totally afford to do, and it's probably part of the budget that we always complain about, if I had to guess.
Yeah, but I mean, like you said, they're ancient. It's ancient. So yeah, I mean, does it work? I mean, yeah, but
bro, it's a bomb. Yeah, it works.
I see that. But you know, if there was a major conflict, it's not. I mean, the Russians' weapons are newer than ours.
That's because they actually don't really maintain them properly. So the maintenance process involves things that they have a hard time getting a hold of. So instead of maintaining them, they replace them. That's why their nuclear warhead stockpile looks newer than ours, because they can't fix their old ones and keep them operational.
We're getting robbed on the maintenance as well by our people. You know,
it's probably cheaper than disposing of them, if I had to guess. Again, I'm not privy to that budget either, but
yeah, anything's cheaper than the Sentinel missile program. I mean, it's about to be. His basic argument is that though the defense budgets are rising, there's not enough money to go around. You know, there's not enough money to do all this stuff. We can't have the boats and, you know, get the pilots and the Air Force strong and replace the nuclear missiles. You know, the amount of money that we would need to modernize all our systems and be ready to fight these wars, there's just not enough money. So that means that we're thin and we're not covering all our bases. And so he's saying that's the crux of his argument, is that we're not ready, which I could see that.
I think we have the strongest and most competent military on this planet. And that's kind of the point of military action in general. It's just be the strongest, right? So who's beating us?
Well, no, it's winning. You got to win. We're not winning.
When's the last time we lost something militarily?
We lost Iraq. We lost Afghanistan. We just lost Ukraine. I mean,
when's the last time we lost something militarily?
It's the war we have to win.
When's the last time we lost anything military? When did we even declare war in Ukraine?
I mean, we got our ass handed to us in Kabul. I mean, come on. You know, I mean, we've had.
Were we militarily defeated in Afghanistan?
We were driven out.
Was that due to our military's inability to fight a conflict? Do you remember losing any battles in Afghanistan?
This isn't how this works.
When you and I were there?
This isn't.
I don't remember losing those battles.
I mean, every time a helicopter goes down, I mean, it's an asymmetric conflict, right? I mean, they just bleed.
Sure. The point I'm saying is that we're militarily proficient and we have a very powerful military.
Yeah, but he's saying it's thin, spread too thin, and we can't do these. You know, we're not winning.
Dude, I read that dude's analysis, and it reminded me of there's like a YouTube channel I like to watch for like the history of Colt firearms as the rifles have evolved in military use. He got fired at some point from the Colt factory, and he started like making videos that are basically like, ever since the day Colt let me leave, they've just sucked at everything. These rifles are just terrible, man. That's what I read when I read that dude's article. Ever since the United States let me leave and retire, they just suck. That's like classic old guy logic, bro. It was like the boomerest thing I've ever read.
I don't know if he's not some ancient, I don't think. I mean,
I'm not saying that he is.
I thought his stuff is fair, but he's looking at it through the prism of like, can we fight two conflicts? Which obviously we can't. And he's showing where we come up short. And he's basically saying there's not enough money for all this.
He's capitalizing on his title to sound some alarms that might somehow be beneficial to him at some point.
I think he's making a coherent argument. I mean, he says...
Or I should say potentially. I'm not stating that as a fact. I think that is a possibility, and that's the way the article came off to me.
You know, these thinkers, these, you know, military thinkers, think tank guys, Heritage Foundation guys, they have to do this kind of stuff. This is their job, do this analysis, and like they come up with like ideas like this and be like, I'm going to study the military and find out if we can do this.
Think tanks are kind of like, I'm going to study this topic and then I'm going to see if I can find a way to profit off of it. And I'm not hating on that. Sometimes they publish some really cool stuff and really interesting stuff that changes stuff, but sometimes they're just talking.
All right. Well, if you really want to like be cynical about this, you know, I think the analysis is apt. You could make a different argument, I guess, but most of it is apt. But you could say like, okay, Lockheed Martin wants to sell more airplanes or that wants to do more boats or whatever. So they give money to the Heritage Foundation and they're like, hey, have this Dakota Wood guy write a paper about how we don't have enough planes. And then he gets paid and he writes his paper and we're like, we don't have enough planes. I was in the military.
Yeah, exactly. This is why I'm skeptical of think tanks in general.
And then they circulate it to their generals as a way of like laundering their own opinion. It's like an end around sales pitch to be like, hey, did you check this out? Like,
I mean, the entire concept of a think tank is to create information that you can use for like marketing purposes. You know what I mean? Like they're independent organizations that are going to talk about something and think about it, write a paper, and then try to get paid for it. So like by definition, they're all a little bit shady, I think. I should say I'm always a little bit skeptical anytime I read something published by a think tank.
I mean, nothing's impartial, but you have to take the information that's being given to you and understand the source that it's coming from, evaluate it against other independent sources of information. And
of course, that's how I treat news or even medicine. Like I don't read a scientific journal publication and like, I'm going to change my practice today based on one article I read. No, I mean, that's silly. Obviously, you need multiple sources and try to figure out which ones.
Critical thinking skills that we need to use today is all good. Yeah, but we can talk about it. I mean, you know, he's making a point and it's interesting. So
it's an interesting point. I just find it incredible to call our Navy week and our Air Force week. You know, I'm a patriotic dude, you know, and I'm proud of my country and all that, but that's not even really the whole thing. Like we have one of them, like objectively and provably, we have one of the, if not the most powerful navies on this planet. But same with Air Force.
The comparison isn't against number two or whatever. You're comparing it against.
That's the only thing that's relevant. Warfighting power. Warfighting power is combative. It's comparative.
What?
Warfighting power is combative. It's comparative by nature.
He's saying
any assessment of any military has to be comparative by definition. You know, by definition, that's the point.
I think it has to be outcomes based because what he's saying is that we don't have the force levels that we need to accomplish our stated objectives. You know, it's not just like a one-on-one, like, oh, we beat China, we have 10 more boats than the UK or whatever. I mean, what if we have to, he's saying, what if we have to fight two countries at the same time? You know, I mean, so I don't know, whatever. But I get it. You don't like his analysis there. So that's fair.
Well, let's say I disagree with it rather than I dislike it.
Yeah. And we don't know where he's coming from. Maybe he's working for some arms company, but that's the last article for our news this week. Thanks, Dibbs. Do you have any final farewells or anything you want to say?
Nah, man. Thanks for having me. Good talk.
Awesome. Great. Well, it was good talk, good analysis, and we'll be getting you back on soon. So have a great weekend, everybody, and talk to you guys next week. Bye.
Have a great night.